So I lived alone in a bad neighborhood just outside of the city. At this point, I had been living there for maybe 3 years, with no incident. Well, I mean, there were several shootings on my street, but no one shot at me, so no incident, I guess. I'm the kind of person who can't sit still for very long, so I find myself standing or pacing a lot. On this particular night, maybe at about 2 a.m., I was pacing while reading a textbook to prepare for an upcoming test at my university. I stopped pacing for a little and just stood near my front door to read. That's when I heard my doorknob turn. For some reason though, I nearly shit myself. I was able to calmly look down at my deadbolt to double check that it was locked. It was. I looked through the peephole to see who was trying to come in, but no one was standing there. Obviously, this was confusing. After the doorknob stopped moving, I figured maybe they'd go around back. So I quickly moved to the back door to make sure it was locked. And once again, thankfully it was. But then my front doorknob turned again. I tiptoe ran to the front door. At this point, my heart is pounding. My dog, a big and protective teddy bear, is looking at me with major concern in his eyes. I look at the front peephole again, but there's still no one there. That's when I hear a small knock on my door as I'm looking through the peephole. Then a small child voice says, "Let me in." Silence. I'm still looking through the peephole while covering my mouth with my hands to make my breathing quieter. Through the peephole, I see a small 3-year-old-ish looking girl walking to the edge of my porch and looking into my bushes. She nods, then says, "Okay," in what I think was supposed to be a whisper. She walks closer to the door again, and I lose sight of her in the peephole. She tries the handle again, then knocks and says, "Please help me." My uncle is a cop, so I've heard of stories about people using children as a way to get into people's homes. So I'm pretty sure that's what was happening at this point. I wasn't sure how to handle the situation though. So I just said, not even into a phone, "Hi, I think someone's at my door trying to break into my apartment. My address? 123 etc etc. Yeah, I'll stay on the line." I then saw a shadow emerge from my bushes. Thankfully, they scooped the kid and ran off. Altogether, there were 2 people and the kid. I never saw them again. In 2019, I graduated with my master's degree and moved to a relatively rural area for my PhD. Thinking we'd make an investment, my dad and I purchased a house. The intent was to rent it out once I completed my PhD. This house was only a block away from a dive bar, where my dad was able to make some pretty good friends. He introduced me to everyone, and everyone let me know that I would be so happy in my new house, because my next door neighbor was the absolute nicest guy you could ever meet. So, we met the neighbor, and he did seem nice enough. He even suggested we exchange numbers just in case I ever needed anything, and I thought that was a good idea. What's the worst that could happen? A few days later, my dad left to go back to his home in another state, and I was left to my own devices. Literally the day he left, it started. My neighbor texted me while I was away and let me know he left a gift for me on my front porch. In this text exchange, he started using pet names like Sweetie and Cutie. I went home, and he had left a hand-painted feeding dish for my cats in my mailbox. At this point, I wasn't that alarmed. He was just being nice, I thought. The next day, he sent me more texts with pet names, and I took the opportunity to make sure he knew that I was not interested in anything romantic. He replied back with a rambling text about how all a person ever needs is friends, and he would like to be friends with me. After that, he would send me texts frequently. Everything from inviting me fishing to telling me he left more gifts on my porch. I would often not reply, or I would tell him I'm busy. I didn't want to be rude, but I also had no interest in any sort of relationship with him other than neighborly. So one night, I got a text from my manager of the bar down the street, letting me know that if my neighbor knocked on my door, I shouldn't answer. She then told me that my neighbor had walked down to the bar with a hatchet and told the bartender he was hearing voices that got louder as he got closer to the bar. He threatened to kill someone with the hatchet if the voices didn't stop. They called the police, and the police took the hatchet from him, but made no arrest. The manager of the bar picked me up, and I spent the night at her house. She told me that the police said my neighbor was on meth. After that, I tried keeping my distance even more, but things only got stranger. One day, I went out to my car to find a dead squirrel in my driveway. This squirrel had very clearly been run over and moved to the right in front of my driver's side door. I just stepped over it, got in my car, and left. When I returned home, the squirrel was gone. Shortly after, I received a text from my neighbor saying something like, "Someone or something put a dead squirrel in your driveway. Don't worry, I moved it for you." I really felt like that was a weird way to word it, and I suspect he was the one who put the squirrel there in the driveway in the first place. Another time, I walked out of my house to see that he had placed an unspent shotgun shell on the bricks in his front yard. He came out and told me that it was to serve as a warning for anyone walking between our houses. For the next couple of months, I did my best to avoid him. He would text me inviting me over, and I would come up with an excuse or just ignore him completely. He would text me as soon as I got home, telling me that he was watching me come and go from my house. Around Halloween, he handcrafted a large casket and wrote, "Here lies the last son of a bitch who played mind games, November 2012. What the fuck? All this time, still sending me texts? Eventually, I got fed up and I stopped responding completely. Less than 2 weeks after I stopped responding completely, he threw a 50-pound flower pot at my front door. You know those big concrete planters? Yeah, one of those. I called the police, who advised me to get a stalking no-contact order. A few days later, I was watching TV when a notification popped up that my neighbor was trying to cast a video to my screen. I declined it twice. I filed another report with the police. During this time, I started the process of getting a stalking no-contact order. I saw 3 different victim advocates, who all told me different things. I went out of town for a conference, and during that time, someone had attempted to break into my home. I had an ADT security system, so while they didn't succeed, I was well aware of the attempt. After the conference, I came home to the entire world shutting down because of COVID. I was trapped in my home 24/7 with my stalker neighbor right next door to me. Luckily, court proceedings for protection orders didn't stop. Right before court, he sent me a text telling me he was sorry for what he'd done, that he could tell when he saw me outside that he made me feel uncomfortable. Then he went on to tell me that he could tell my hair had gotten longer and I looked beautiful. I went to court and provided all the evidence I had, the timeline of everything that had ever happened, the texts he'd sent me asking if I wanted a massage, the texts I sent him telling him the way he was speaking to me was inappropriate, the text saying that he knew that he made me feel uncomfortable. I told the judge that I suspected he had attempted to break into my house while I was out of town. The kicker is, he didn't deny any of it. Actually, he told the judge that he took full accountability for everything. He said he was in recovery and was trying to turn over a new leaf. He didn't oppose the protection order at all. So in March 2020, I actually received the stalking no-contact order. Everything was pretty quiet for a while. I mean, he did some weird shit, but that's because he's a weird guy. It wasn't anything that made me fear for my safety though. That is, until he got on drugs again. At this time, we found an unspent shotgun casing in my flower bed. It was consistent with the one he had previously used to send a warning. This occurred a couple of months after I started dating my boyfriend, and I suspect it was a warning to him. After this, and a variety of reasons, my boyfriend moved in with me. He moved in pretty quickly, but everything turned out fine. We're still together, as happy in our relationship as we can be. In New Year's 2021, I was awoken to yelling. I turned on my security cameras and got footage of him sticking his head out of his window and screaming obscenities at my bedroom window for 7 whole minutes. It doesn't sound like a long time, but when your stalker is screaming threats and obscenities for 7 minutes straight, it's pretty long. He said, "Happy fucking New Year." He also said he was going to blow up his house with his gas line. I called the police. They told me that he never said my name, so they can't prove it was a violation of the protection order. The officer said, and I quote, "There's nothing illegal about yelling in your own house." They left without even speaking to him. All I could do at this point was do my best to avoid him. I parked on the street because my driveway is pretty close to his front porch. I got used to living with my curtains drawn. I always made sure my cameras were charged, all 5 of them. Yes, because of him, I spent over $1,000 on cameras. Every inch of my yard was covered. Since then, he's been seen by me and my other neighbors talking to people who aren't even there, going outside and screaming nonsense. This basically brings me to last week. In the morning, I was getting ready for the day when I heard screaming. "Someone is going to die over this sweatshirt." I turned on the cameras. I got footage of him walking around the alley behind my house screaming, "Are you fucking proud? How about I get my shotgun? I'll get everybody all fired up." I called the police immediately. Once again, they didn't charge him with any violation of the protection order. Instead, they gave him an ordinance violation for disturbing the peace. The police told me that it seems like he was off his medication again, and that was that. They left. Last night, I was awoken to hammering outside my window at 1 a.m. He was cutting down his privacy fence, horizontally. I called the police for a noise complaint, and they just told him to stop, and that was that. As I write this, he is outside, continuing to horizontally cut down his privacy fence. That means the privacy fence only stands about 3 feet tall now. This was the one thing that made me feel relatively safe about hanging out in my own backyard, and now that's gone too. All of this to say, I'm fucking tired. I just want to live in a house where I can be sure that my neighbor won't try to kill me, where I can feel confident that he won't try to break in. My boyfriend and I are trying to buy a new house to move into, but it's difficult. I'm a PhD student, so I don't make very much money. Renting won't work either, because I have 4 cats, plus my partner's cat and dog, although we do have a place secured for them if necessary. And finding a place to rent with so many animals is difficult, if not impossible. I refuse to rehome them, so maybe it's partially my fault I'm stuck in this situation. My dad has agreed to co-sign on another mortgage, and I've gotten a second job. We should be able to save up enough money within a few months, but until then, I'm stuck. I'm tired, I'm angry. I just don't know what else to do. "13 or 14 years ago, when I was around 12 or 13, my family had a gathering at my grandma's house, which we did very often back then. My brother, cousins, both boys, and I, a girl, were playing in the inflatable pools in the backyard. The neighbor kid, probably my brother's age, 15 or 16, climbed his fence so he could talk to us. We were having fun, joking and chatting with him, so we asked if he'd like to join us. My grandma gave the okay, and he came over to partake in the festivities. Everything was great until my cousins and brother went inside to help with something. I got nervous when they left, but I'm a socially anxious person who is especially nervous around guys, so I pushed it aside. Suddenly, the cool kid from next door became a jerk. He started hurling insults at me while grinning. I figured he was just playing around, so I did it back. We started splashing each other, but then he got super aggressive. He was splashing me so much I kept taking in water. I turned my head away and told him to slow down, still kind of laughing. When he didn't stop, I got serious and told him to knock it off. He stopped. I was clearing my eyes of water when he grabbed this bucket. He filled it with water and put the bucket on my head. I went to take it off, but he shoved me down. I got the bucket off and asked what was wrong with him. He just grabbed me and shoved my head under the water. I got dangerously close to passing out when he was pulled off of me. I came up gasping for air, and my brother pulled me behind him and asked the kid what the hell he was doing. The little douche laughed and he said we were just playing. My brother stepped forward and asked how trying to drown me is playing. The kid kept smirking, and my brother told him he needs to stay away from us. The kid scoffed and angrily said, "You guys are boring anyway," and was escorted out by my sibling. We never said anything to the adults for reasons I can't understand, but the kid kept taunting us at his backyard. He even brought one of his friends to mock us and insult us, which resulted in us telling our family, so that stopped real quick. He tried to call us liars, but wasn't believed. Shortly after, that family moved out, and we never dealt with him again. I'm very grateful for my brother, who essentially raised me. He has helped me in more ways than I can count. I don't know where I'd be without him.